It's not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. That's a quote from Seneca, a Stoic philosopher from ancient Rome, which feels fitting because we all know what happened to Rome. And in case you live under a rock, or the education system failed you like it did for me, due to political and economic instability, military decline, and invasions, Rome collapsed under the weight of its own dysfunction. I think it's safe to say that the world we currently live in feels, at best, unstable, with global tensions rising, economic instability, and the rise of artificial intelligence. The future feels more uncertain than ever. And when faced with uncertainty, I think it's a great time to examine our own behavior and the system that influences it. So today I want to talk a bit about consumerism and materialism. I'd like to just examine the history of each, explore the pros and cons, relate them back to our current time, and talk to you about my own personal relationship to materialism. But before we dive in, I want to hear from you. What's one thing that you used to buy that now seems unaffordable? Drop the answer in the comments because I would love to learn a little bit more about this audience and what your needs are. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button for more content on psychology, mindset, and modern life. Subscribing really helps the channel reach a wider audience, and I really appreciate it, seriously. So let's start by defining consumerism and materialism, because even though they often are used interchangeably, they mean different things. And honestly, I didn't even realize this until recently. So consumerism is a behavior. Materialism is a belief. Materialism turns desire into demand. Consumerism is a social and economic order that encourages the acquisition of goods and services in ever-increasing amounts. While materialism, on the other hand, is more of a value system where individuals place a high importance on material possessions, believing that possessions are essential to their happiness and identity. Consumerism and materialism both exist within the capitalistic structure that needs people to buy and sell things to function and grow. Basically, consumerism drives the behavior of purchasing, while materialism reflects the belief system that assigns value to those purchases. Now let's look at some history. For most of human existence, people owned very little. The idea of private ownership, accumulation of goods, and identity through possessions is relatively new. It wasn't until the 17th century that consumerism as we know it started to emerge in Europe during what historians now call the Consumer Revolution. As conditions began to improve, a flourishing middle class began to emerge. This class had disposable income and started purchasing goods beyond mere necessities. Items like imported textiles, spices, and decorative household items became symbols of status and refinement. In the 18th century, this era witnessed an explosion in the availability and consumption of goods. The rise of colonial trade introduced European consumers to products like sugar, tobacco, and tea. Shopping evolved into a leisure activity with the establishment of shopping streets in cities like London and Paris. Key literature from this time period delved into the implications of this growing consumer culture. The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776 by Adam Smith, explored the dynamics of economic systems and introduced concepts like the division of labor and free markets. He observed how self-interest and the pursuit of goods could drive economic prosperity. In The Moral Economy by Laurence Fontaine, he examined the interplay between poverty, credit, and trust in early modern Europe, shedding light on the societal impacts of emerging consumer behaviors. These works, among others, sparked debates about the moral and economic consequences of a society increasingly focused on consumption. Now, most of us know this man, Sigmund Freud, but I bet you don't know his nephew, Edward Bernays. Bernays took Freud's ideas about human desire and used them to sell products. He didn't just advertise soap, he made it feel like a statement of identity. Cigarettes weren't just tobacco, they were torches of freedom for women. His influence shaped the psychological tactics that still dominate advertising today. When you see a celebrity holding a luxury bag, or an influencer showing you their latest fashion haul, it all traces back to Bernays. Over time, the consumer identity evolved. After consumption took root, it began to shape personal identities and societal structures. During the Industrial Revolution, the 19th century's technological advancements led to mass production, making goods more accessible and affordable. This allowed more individuals to express themselves through their possessions. During the post-World War II boom, the mid-20th century saw a surge in consumer culture, especially in America. Suburbanization, the proliferation of automobiles, and the advent of television advertising reinforced the idea that happiness and success were tied to material possessions. In the late 20th to early 21st century, the rise of digital technology and globalization further accelerated consumerism. Online shopping, fast fashion, and influencer marketing have made consumption more immediate and pervasive. And here's where it gets a bit deeper. The pursuit of more clothes, more tech, more everything. We often forget what we're really trading. As philosopher Henry David Thoreau once said, the price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it. The new phone, the designer bag, the extra car, it's not just money, it's hours of your life, days, months, even years you spend earning, maintaining, worrying, repairing. We think we own our stuff, but often our stuff owns us. We protect it, we clean it, we go into debt for it, we stress over it, we let it define who we are. It's like a beautiful cage we build for ourselves, one purchase at a time. And the question we must start asking is this: who are we without the things we buy? Psychiatrist Erich Fromm once said, "If I am what I have, and if what I have is lost, who then am I?" The question feels more relevant than ever in today's world of overconsumption and the purchasing of social status through possessions. In modern society, Descartes would have said, "I shop, therefore I am." Stick with me because while this may sound bleak, I'll explain at the end how it could also be the moment we finally start building lives that actually feel meaningful. Let's talk about where we are now. Across the globe, we're seeing signs that the consumer engine is stalling. Inflation is hitting everything from groceries to gas, rent to insurance. Wages are not keeping up. Real income for most workers has stayed flat while the cost of living continues to soar. Debt has exploded in the US alone. Household debt has surpassed $18 trillion. Buy now, pay later services are booming, not because people want to defer payments, but because they have to. Klarna even partnered with DoorDash, so you can now finance a pizza. If that's not a sign of economic collapse, I don't know what is. People can no longer afford to live the lifestyle that society has taught them to strive for. Consumer spending makes up nearly 70% of US GDP. When people can't spend, the economy doesn't just slow, it halts. And what happens when people stop spending? Not by choice, but because they physically can't. We see early warning signs such as credit card delinquencies at decade highs. 1 in 5 student loan borrowers is past due. Consumer sentiment has dropped lower than it was during the pandemic, and yet we're still encouraged to buy, to upgrade, to spend. And in that environment, consumerism becomes less like a lifestyle and more a survival game with no winners. It's like a house of cards just waiting on a strong wind to blow it over. This isn't just about numbers, it's about people making impossible choices. Rent or food, medicine or gas, essentials or dignity. According to the Department of Housing and Urban Development's 2024 Annual Homeless Assessment Report, approximately over 700,000 people experienced homelessness in January 2024, making an 18% increase from the previous year. We've also seen a rise in people living in cars. In San Francisco, the number of people living in cars increased by 45% between 2017 and 2019. And nationally, as of mid-2022, over 3 million Americans were estimated to be living in recreational vehicles, reported by MBO partners. The truth is, many of us are running on fumes. If you don't believe me, check out my last video where I explore some of our basic needs, and I ask people to comment below with what feels harder in their lives. And honestly, I was overwhelmed with all the responses of just how many people are struggling right now. And I've gone through it myself. I have a teaching job, I make videos, and on top of that, I still find myself doing gig work occasionally, doing deliveries just to stay above water, and sometimes that doesn't even work. So if the economy collapses under the weight of our own expectations, what then? What happens if the machine breaks down? Do we find new ways to finance our wants and chase the illusion of more? Or do we pivot? There's a growing movement towards less. Minimalism, degrowth, intentional living, not as a trend, but as a response to burnout, financial strain, and environmental collapse. I've noticed it in myself. When I was younger, I was much more interested in having the latest gadget or a new pair of Nikes, but over time I realized none of that was actually making me happy. Having multiple pairs of shoes to choose from really wasn't adding anything to my life. I think we're starting to see more people asking, what do I actually need? What matters when everything is unstable? What kind of life is sustainable? Not just for the planet, but for their own mental health. Some are finding joy in connection over consumption, time over things, experiences over excess. This isn't just aesthetic minimalism or Instagrammable simplicity. It's existential. It's survival. It's the quiet but radical idea that maybe, just maybe, the way out isn't more, it's less. So now what? Consumerism may be the engine and materialism the fuel, but we are the drivers. And maybe now we're finally asking, where is this road taking us? We've been sold the idea that fulfillment comes from outside of us, that we can buy our way into wholeness, and really, who has that benefited? Maybe we can learn from the wisdom of older traditions. Stoicism, Buddhism, and other indigenous worldviews often view ownership as impermanent and identity as something deeper than what you wear or drive. We all know that once you die, you can't take it with you. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not an economist. I'm not claiming to have the answers, and honestly, there probably isn't a simple solution to begin with. But it's worth exploring what kinds of changes, both big and small, might help us build a more meaningful future. And while individual changes matter, we also need to consider some macro solutions, such as closing tax loopholes. Even Warren Buffett has said the rich are definitely undertaxed relative to the general population, and he's also said that his secretary pays higher taxes than he does. We should try to move towards a living wage that reflects the actual cost of living in a given area. We should start to consider and plan for what will happen with the increase in jobs being taken over by AI. And if we can somehow increase global cooperation to stabilize trade and rebuild resilient supply chains, it just might move us towards a brighter future. We need to stop measuring growth by how much we consume and start measuring it by how well we live. So what do you think? Is consumption dead? Can we rise above our materialistic desires? Is there a change you want to see in how the system works or how we show up in it? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you found this video useful, please share it. We may not be able to change the economy overnight, but we can start changing the story we tell ourselves. And that's how change begins. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I really hope to see you in the next one.